Director Kennedy. Chair, we do not have a quorum. However, we have no action items, so we may proceed with our discussion
Okay,
items.
so we'll begin with the strategic plan update, and Jamie Parker, Director of Strategy and Planning, and Caitlin Timrick, Deputy General Superintendent, will give the, proceed with the discussion. So take it away.
All right. All right. We'll get started. So good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Caitlin Timrack, and since last summer, I served as our interim strategic planning administrator up until we were able to bring Jamie on full-time in the full-time director of planning and strategy role. So really excited to have been working with her over the last few months, transitioning this over, and today we're excited to share with you an update on our 2023 successes as well as our plan for 2024. So we'll go to the next slide. As a reminder, this is our strategic plan framework that was developed. Believe it or not, 2024 is the third year of our five-year plan. So this is very exciting. Oh, thank you very much. This is very exciting that we're here. So as a reminder, we have 6 focus areas: financial stability, technology modernization, workforce development and enrichment, customer service excellence and stakeholder engagement, infrastructure resiliency and reliability, as well as organizational and operational improvement. And each of these has 4 to 5 different goal areas that tie back to the challenges that were identified in the initial plan, and ideally, through this process, we're addressing those items that were identified. So I did want to take a moment and summarize some of our key successes by focus area for 2023. In the financial stability area, we awarded our contract to Oracle to replace our aging financial system. We hired a new controller, and we also onboarded a Fuse fellow focused on revenue recovery. In technology modernization, we developed a 5-year schedule to upgrade our key software systems and selected a consultant to write an RFP for an asset management system. Under workforce development, we initiated the people plan. We hired a permanent HR director, restarted Leadership Essentials, and did a lot of work around training and support for the 2024 performance period for staff towards the end of the year. And I believe Julie Schroller previously reported on that, on the great successes we had there. On customer service, the team initiated a clearing of outstanding investigations from 2022 and earlier, increased training for staff, and we set documented expectations regarding individual and team performance, and actively recruited multilingual customer service representatives. On the infrastructure resilience side, we rolled out a formal pumping and power dashboard that is available for the public. We implemented a formal maintenance escalations team. We did start to provide more details on our specific drainage funding needs that were provided externally as part of other conversations, and we also selected our consultant for the water quality master plan. And on the organizational improvement side, internally, we did some work around developing procurement guidance documents. We did hire into project manager positions that were approved by civil service earlier in the year. We made ad hoc improvements to a variety of coordination pieces between the General Superintendent's office and other organizations or other departments. And we're also successful in achieving salary increases for both operations and administrative leadership that were key for recruitment and retention purposes.
What's USM-USA?
The Utility Services Manager and Utility Services Administrator series, those are positions that we use for our higher level managers. And another accomplishment they made in 2023 was the standardization of reporting on our metrics. So each focus area has a variety of metrics, and you'll see those in the 2023 plan that you should have before you. And so what we wanted to do here today was talk through one of them so you can see as an example. So this is an example that was taken from the customer service area. And each metric follows the same general format, where we have an objective of what we're trying to do, why it's important to us. On the bottom left, what the metric is, whatever the data is at the end of the reporting period. In this case, we have it through December of 2023. And in the middle is our data trend. We have some pretty good data now for most of these metrics for 2 years, 2022 and 2023. And so we're showing that trend of that data over time and then including a narrative of how we finish the year. So in this case, again, this is a customer service metric of average speed of answer of a customer call. We're measuring this. It's a measure of how quickly our customer service representatives are able to answer the telephone to assist customers with calls. And keeping this value low enhances our customer service and our experience and our customers' experience when reaching out. It's a little bit difficult to see on here, and I apologize for that, but there are a couple of benchmark values that are included in this data trends. There are some metrics that we're reporting on that do have benchmarkable values from AWWA and other sources, and we've shown them on here. There's a 25th percentile benchmark as well as a 75th percentile benchmark. So our target in this case is 5 minutes, and you can see it's kind of fluctuated over the time, ending the year at 5.2 minutes, which is still quite good. And this metric, as we note here, is tied to our staffing levels. And so you can see how that fluctuates over time.
It's gotten a lot smoother.
Yeah.
But when we have a target that we create, what is the standard, industry standard?
So in this case, it's 5 minutes.
5 minutes
Yeah.
is the industry
This is the
standard.
benchmarkable value for this. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so showing, the intention here is to show our data trends over time, see where we're going up or down in either direction, and what that means for each for metric, and make adjustments as needed. So we have this sort of format for all of the metrics identified for each area.
Was the 8 new staff members the target goal, or is there a need for more?
I will have to, I don't know if our customer service.
What's the question?
Was 8 new staff members the target, or is there a need for more?
No, at that time, that was the target, yes.
Okay.
Yep, good question. So, again, recognizing that 2024 is our 3rd year of a 5-year plan, we wanted to sit down with the team, take some feedback we received, and we conducted a workshop at the beginning of 2024 to review what went well and where we had areas for improvement. We identified multiple areas, positive outcomes of the process, as well as several areas for improvement. So most notably, we noted that staff felt and are empowered to make change, but at the same time, we also recognize that we can't address all of these issues all at once with the same group of people. So recognizing that and taking into account other challenges, we modified our approach to 24 a little bit. So as is not atypical for an organization of our size facing such large complex issues, we were hampered a little bit in 2023 with staff turnover, data availability, and of course, the occasional shift in focus due to external events. A good example of this would have been saltwater intrusion. It's very appropriate for us to focus a large part of our resources in this organization to that effort, but of course, then other things have to take a step back from time to time. So in addition to that, we also recognize that it was a little bit difficult in some cases to tie our tactics and work back to the goals and challenges that were identified in that initial plan. And as such, needed more specific actionable goals to clearly demonstrate our progress. So taking all of that into consideration, we have made a few shifts to our approach for implementing our plan in 2024. Primarily, instead of focusing on 24 total goals, 4 to 5 per focus area, we've pared that down to about 2 for focus area. There are still multiple tactics per goal, but this is more reasonable given where we're at with all of the demands on everyone's time. Additionally, as our staff and teams are more comfortable through this process, working together in this approach, we're shifting to more team-driven meetings, individual progress team meetings, and we'll have a mid-year check-in with the full strategic plan leadership like we did earlier in the year so that we can realign everyone as needed and identify further opportunities for coordination.
Caitlin, we've never had, it's been on the list as far as I remember from starting to have a chief improvement officer. Where do we stand on that, Ghassan?
It's one of those where clearly it fell off the radar for a while just because we're focusing on many other areas and staffing needs.
Mm-hmm.
So it's on the books, and it's just a matter of refocusing and highlighting the timing and what the skill set that we need at the time.
So who then has oversight for, the accountability in making sure goals are happening here, being reached? Where is
What
it
I would-
Jamie, or is it?
Well, that would be a counterpart to Jamie. And as we have it now, structured where Jamie has a direct line to me, just like Ed Sutherland as, our auditor has a direct line to me, that would be no different where specifically to accountability and monitoring progress would be a direct report to me.
Do we have a process in place yet? I know you're new, Jamie, for keeping on top of people or what's moving, to keep things moving?
I don't think there's a formal process in place, but that's something I've been looking at in terms of participating in the team-driven meetings and, kind of being more involved on more of a regular basis than checking in periodically.
And are there timetables for the goals within the year rather than just saying this is something we're going to do during the year? This may be getting ahead in the presentation.
Yeah, I think we can speak to that in a minute. I think
We can wait.
the teams do have some individual benchmarks throughout the year,
Okay.
and we'll review those as needed, but yeah.
Okay.
So just the last thing before I'll hand it over to Jamie is, again, we did recognize and taking some feedback that it was really important that we pulled out our major projects that are year-over-year projects that are items that really have a significant impact on the utility and also significant public impact. So that includes our billing strike team, the Oracle's financial implementation, people plan, power complex, and of course the Lead and Copper Rule program, which we'll hear more about today. So those items recognized could get buried in some of those other work. We want to pull those forward and recognize that these are longer lasting approaches. So in the 2024 report implementation plan, we do have those outlined in this format. So with that, we'll go into some of the individual areas for 2024.
Okay, and then these are the pared down 2 to 3 areas of focus for 2024. So in the area of financial sustainability, one of the things we're wanting to do is improve our understanding of actual spending in real time. So to do this, the Finance Department plans to hold quarterly meetings to analyze actual spending against the budget. And the goal is to eventually broaden this group to include key personnel in other departments. So doing this would help us better understand our budget anomalies that may occur during the year and better plan for next year's budgetary needs. We're also looking to build upon our progress from last year in updating our financial policies, which is tied to the implementation of our new financial management system. And we're working to create an ad hoc team to identify and pursue loans, grants, and other funding sources to ensure we don't miss out on any revenue opportunities.
Jamie, when we talk about real-time spending data being currently limited, do we have anything that makes it real-time, or does that just have to wait for the new software? I mean, it looks like we have quarterly meetings because that's when the things are finally collected. Is that?
Right, but our budget office does tracking on quarterly basis, and obviously within the quarter, they also have a very good idea of how certain budget for a certain item is tracking, and there's communication between the budget office and the particular department.
But, I mean, if the issue is that real-time spending data is currently limited, is there anything going on that's going to change the availability of real-time spending data?
Yes, ultimately, the new financial
new
system
financial
will
system,
enable us to be more efficient and more automated, but absent of that today, we do have, more primitive means, but nonetheless, we do it.
Okay, so in the area of technology, our focus here is to continue our progress in updating and modernizing the systems that are necessary for us to operate. So I think Caitlin mentioned a few of these, but one is a new human resources software system that would enable us to effectively manage workforce data. Looking forward to a new billing system that will streamline internal processes for staff and support cloud-based functions, as well as a new asset management system to help us monitor and maintain infrastructure, facilities, and equipment. And all of these upgrades are in various stages of the proposal process. Then we're also looking to strengthen our cybersecurity protection at the Algiers Water Plant, which will include completing an evaluation and risk assessment that is required by the federal government.
Okay, kind of going backwards, we've had completing need assessments on for 3 years now. So is that, what is going on? Have we done the needs assessment and we're working on developing right now, or are we still doing needs assessments?
I think I can speak to the needs assessment process in general. There was one completed for the financial system that I had to go through, and all of these require a certain amount of, internal review, internal understanding what has to be done, and then go through this. So we have been talking about needs assessment for a long time, but that's been, each individual area has to have its own review done. And so a major accomplishment of last year was coming out with the 5-year plan to get through all of these steps, including a procurement perspective, so we could get through all of these activities. So it's maybe the needs assessment on financial system and then needs assessment on asset management system, and we have to do that for each individual
Right,
system.
right.
Yeah.
But all I'm saying is we've had it for 3 years on the plan, so. it
So an
keeps slipping.
RFP has been issued for the consultant to help draft the RFP for the new human resources planning as well as the new billing system. So we do have chosen, or in the process of choosing, a consultant, and that consultant will draft the RFP for the new human resources planning. So it has processed. Julie can expand more, but there has been movement, and that movement has been a consultant, choosing of a consultant that will actually help the board draft an RFP for the new human resources software. So it probably should have been expanded to show the different phases.
Yeah, we can certainly include that. And
I just joined the table long enough to say, because I was in the room, the consultants arrived this morning for the kickoff of the needs assessment for the HRIS. So I'm super excited about this week. They're going to be here for 3 days.
Am I hearing the question say, we've been talking about what we haven't shown
Yes,
action?
yes.
Well,
It's been,
it's arguable. I mean, the first thing we had to do is prioritize and define what the priorities are and where the needs are in general. And we came up with about 5 key projects that had to be done. So that was a needs assessment that was done in-house to, with a large group to kind of make sure that there's alignment. And now we have been doing needs assessment and actually passed that, take the financial system upgrade. That went through that process of needs assessment, the RFP. We do have a vendor online working with us. And it's the same process would follow with everybody else. So while it seemed like it's taking a long time, it's the process. And there's also capacity that most of these, obviously, as you can imagine, go through our IT, and there are so much you can process through that one unit. So it's staggered, it's sequenced in such a way that we can manage it and without overwhelming one unit and miss out on quality. So I don't feel we're behind. I mean, it appears it may be slow, but I think it's taking its course in a very intentional and designed way.
But I also think that we probably needed to break it out to show the process better.
yeah, I mean, I assume
process
before we
better.
go out to develop an RFP or hire someone to do an RFP, we've done the needs consultant. I mean, the needs assessment. Is that correct? Or are we hiring the consultant to do the needs
We're
assessment?
hiring a
At times,
consultant
we
to the
do
needs
hire
assessment.
outside resource to help us put that RFP, and obviously we're calling that needs assessment.
Okay.
So we know what we're asking for, we have all the KPIs in there, and we know what we're setting the real expectations and
To ensure that
product.
we are meeting all the needs of the various departments, there are focus groups that the consultant actually conducts to make sure that when the RFP is drafted for the new human resources or for the building system, every T is crossed and every I is dotted. So there are focus groups that the consultant will actually conduct to make sure that when we do put the RFP out, that it includes every part and every need that the board.
Another driver that has to be obviously considered is cost, right? So that's part of our budgeting process, and none of these projects are cheap. Softwares cost a lot of money, so we kind of keep that in mind in terms of how we sequence them.
But are we saying we're going to be out with an RFP on all three of these in the fourth quarter?
Yeah?
Okay.
And I'll just add to, these are the bigger picture, like this is the focus of the year, but when I'm reporting and updating, I can provide kind of the details that Yolanda just mentioned, like within the process, we're at these sub-steps.
Okay. Is there a dashboard on that, Jamie, or is that
There,
just a manual report?
there is a dashboard that can be utilized through our consultant, Raftelis, that I'm becoming familiar
Yeah.
with, and hopefully we'll be able to build up and share and generate reports that way.
Question. Bear with me with this question. In terms of what's happening legislatively with the recommendations from the committee and the indication that the state perhaps is looking for a way to impose a new building system, does this in fact address that or not?
So all this work had been going on way before the task force.
That's what I thought.
The task force recommendations, as far as I'm concerned, they came out, they were considered, and it's more meaningful to look at the legislative actions that is happening as we speak in terms of how they're going to impact us, and none of them really impact any of this work. I mean, there are probably about 3 or 4 specific bills that will impact us, and as you know, we've been working very closely with the authors of the bills to make sure the outcomes are more meaningful and favorable to us, that will actually help us. So I think it's, it's a matter of a couple of weeks before they're final, and then obviously we'll come and share with you, but I'm not concerned about any of them in terms of having any challenges or adverse impact on us.
Okay.
Okay, so our next area is workforce development and enrichment. And here, our priorities are, one, focusing on employees. So this team has recognized the importance of connecting new hires to the utility during the onboarding process. And so they're looking for ways to illustrate how new employees fit within the organization, why their work is important to the utility, and more broadly, why their work is important to the city. Another area of focus will be establishing standard operating procedures. So we want to ensure that employees understand the personnel policies that affect them, and they feel confident that these policies are being administered consistently and fairly throughout the organization. We're also looking to bring some civil service training in-house to make it easier for employees to achieve promotions and gain professional development. So here we've already accepted internal applications for instructors, and we'll be embarking on the interview process for that soon. Also looking at retaining institutional knowledge, we're working to develop and implement a succession plan, starting with our drop employees. And then finally, we've seen a need to increase capacity in our communications department. So to that end, we will be reviewing our existing positions to see if any can transition to communications, and if needed, we will complete a job studies for new communications positions. In the area of customer service, we want to continue improving our internal processes and organizational structure. So for 2024, these priorities include reviewing customer service policies and updating them so they align with current best practices, as well as developing and facilitating a comprehensive formal training program for all customer service personnel. We will also be developing and implementing training sessions for personnel in other departments who interact with customers. So our goal here is to provide consistency in our interactions with the public. And then finally, we've identified some gaps in our current organizational structure. So we will be working to create and fill new management positions this year.
On the list at the beginning of the 5 things, AMI was obviously on that, right?
Yes.
Is billing issues on that list?
The strike team in general and all of the items that fall, yes.
Okay. I mean, is it broken out, or is it just under AMI?
Well, yeah, I mean, we can go back and look at the,
I can't remember what it
yeah,
said.
let's go back and look at our, so kind of our, yeah, so in line with the smart
Maybe
meter
billing strike team.
implementation,
Okay,
recognize the impact of billing on our reputation, customer satisfaction, efficiency, the strike team's strategic effort aimed at resolving longstanding issues we faced.
okay, thank you.
Okay, so in the area of infrastructure resiliency and reliability, we are striving to enhance our external communications about our capital program. So while we internally are, well-versed on our capital needs, we have seen that we need to do a better job of sharing this information with stakeholders and the community. Also, a key component to strengthening infrastructure resiliency is to have a formal process in place to prioritize capital improvements for our systems. So we will be working to develop this and the prioritization criteria this year, and then continuing our work on the water quality master plan, which will be focusing on several issues, including minimizing water loss and saltwater intrusion mitigation. So the master planning process kicked off in April, and work is expected to continue over the next 18 months. Excuse me. And then finally, in the area of organizational and operational improvement, much of our focus will be on increasing personnel capacity in 3 areas. So one is in our water quality and purification processes so we can maintain safe operations. The second would be creating new positions for specialized staff to support the smart meter program. And then 3 is creating new positions to support the technology needs of the new power complex. And then also continuing to work on developing a culture of safety. So many of our employees work in hazardous conditions, and so we will be developing and implementing training and procedures that help mitigate the risks associated with this type of work. And so those are the focus areas and tactics for 2024. And then, as I mentioned, I think it would be helpful, like while these are the general kind of big goals we're striving to achieve, when I'm coming back to report on progress, it's more in the details of like where we stand on each of these things.
Jamie, do we have something that shows us where things currently, we're 5 months, almost 5 months into the year. Do we have something that shows where they actually stand now?
I don't, but that will be something I will be preparing and can share.
Okay. Okay, and,
That concludes your.
okay,
Yes.
thank you. Thank you, both of you. So next, we're going to have Felicia Bergeron.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm Felicia.
Principal engineer. She's now going to present the Lead and Copper Rule Program overview.
Yes. I have like a quick little handout as well that you can look at during, after.
Thank you.
Sure. And I have some extras I'm gonna put right here. Okay, thank you. Also have some items for a little show and tell afterwards. Let's see. I brought along a lead pipe in my bag. So if anybody would like to take a look afterwards, that's what it looks like.
Fossil.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah. So, okay. Right, so thanks for having me today. Like you were saying, my name is Felicia Bergeron. I'm a principal engineer with Sewage and Water Board. I've been the program lead for the lead and copper rule for a little under a year now. So today I'd like to share with you some information about some major federal regulations pertaining to lead in drinking water that will impact our utility for a decade or more. So just a quick agenda and some points that I hope you'll take away from the presentation today are that we're leading the state in our response to this complicated regulation as it continues to be revised by EPA. Our ultimate goal is to replace all of the lead service lines in our system. But meeting this goal and the regulation will be labor, timing, and financially challenging. But we're using a multifaceted approach to accomplish this, and a key component of our effort is going to be engaging with the community. So lead can cause serious health problems for infants, young children, and pregnant women. There are many sources of lead, but we are focusing today on lead pipes and drinking water. Lead was commonly used in plumbing for decades, long before the serious health effects of exposure were known. But as understanding grew, regulations were adopted to protect the public health from harm from lead. And in 1986, the Federal State Drinking Water Act was amended to ban the use of lead in plumbing fixtures used for human consumption. And as you can see, though, lead can also be seen in many fixtures in the home, such as faucets, copper pipe with lead solder, and internal plumbing. But today we're going to focus on the lead service line, which connects the main water line to the home. So how does lead get into drinking water? So there is no detectable lead that leaves our treatment plants. However, particles from lead pipes and plumbing fixtures can dissolve into water as it travels from the treatment plant to our taps. And in many water systems across the country, including New Orleans, the service line that connects the distribution system to the home could be lead. These lines are on both the utility-owned public side of the system and on the private side of the system. So as you can see here, the blue line is what I'm talking about. That's the service line. The public space of the service line goes from the main to the water meter, and the private property side of the service line goes from the water meter to the point of entry into the home. And the pipe materials of these service lines can be made of copper, PVC, galvanized steel, or lead. So because we know that lead can enter our water supply from lead pipes and fixtures, we have historically taken steps to protect our community. With a process called corrosion control, we minimize the tendency for lead to dissolve into water from pipes, lead solder, and plumbing fixtures. We specifically use calcium hydroxide in the water, which raises the pH of the water level and minimizes the tendency for lead to go into the water. We also perform water quality testing. It's a critical element, and it allows us to ensure compliance with federal and state mandates. And we also provide free lead testing to customers upon request. We also do service line replacements, and we have historically replaced lead service lines on the utility-owned public side. School notifications are also done when lead service lines are found on the utility side or on the private side, and we coordinate the replacements with the schools at their schedule. We also provide informational materials, such as through our website, door hangers, and our consumer confidence report. And we're also setting up a pilot program for customers to be able to request a picture if they have concerns about a lead service line, and I'm going to talk more about that later. Okay, so let's get a little bit into the regulations now. After the ban on lead pipes and plumbing, EPA recognized that there were still areas of risks, and because no level of lead Because no level of lead is safe, additional federal regulations have been put into place to protect communities. So the initial lead and copper rule was finalized in 1991, and it focused solely on actions that utilities could take within their operations, but no actions were required on private property. Then in 2021, the lead and copper rule revisions were put into place with a compliance date of October 16th, 2024. So you can see here some of the requirements of the lead and copper rule revisions. Now, last year, the EPA proposed the lead and copper rule improvements, or the LCRI. The LCRI has a compliance date of 2027. It's just a proposal. It hasn't been finalized yet. But one of the things that remains from LCRR is that we have to have a publicly available lead service line inventory due by October 16th of 2024. All of the other requirements of the LCRR have been shifted and enhanced, and you can see those on the right-hand side. And those now have a compliance date of 2027. The one that I want to point out to you is the second one down, which is 100% lead service line replacement within 10 years, starting in 2027. So that will have an ending date of 2037. So for the rest of the presentation, I'm going to refer to the LCRI and the LCRR as just the regulations to avoid confusion. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about our lead program and the steps we're taking. So we're taking a comprehensive approach to the program and deploying resources throughout the Sewage and Water Board. Even as the proposed regulation changes are being worked through, we are allocating appropriate resources and making progress. So now I'm going to take you through every one of the program elements, starting with the inventory. The current regulations require that the inventory be created for all lead service line materials by October of this year. We have partnered with Blue Conduit on this effort, and they are assisting with compiling data from several sources and also with digital mapping. So like I've said a bunch of times, the inventory must be due by October 16, 2024. And to complete the inventory, EPA says that you first have to rely on historical records showing the service line materials on both sides of the service line. So with a city as old as New Orleans, as you can imagine, these records are incomplete, illegible, or missing sometimes.
What do you do?
If they're missing, I'm going to get to this on the next slide, but it's called an unknown. If you don't have any records, then the service line material is unknown.
And by default, it has to be considered lead until proven otherwise.
So reviewing these records is painstaking and time-consuming, and as you can see, sometimes they have to be pulled by hand. So that picture is of a tap card. They're all records that were typed by hand, so you have to pull through them, and we also have plumbing inspection reports, which are similar to that. So based on the work that we've done so far, our initial findings, based on a small sample pool, show that 40 to 60% of metered locations will likely include a lead service line.
Are these on private, public, or both?
Both.
Okay.
Yep, those are on both. So that equates to approximately 58,000 to 87,000 lead service lines. So, like we were just hinting at, we also have a very high percentage of unknown service lines. So when I say unknown, I'm referring to a service line with no Sewage and Water Board records, and therefore the material type is unknown. This high percentage of unknowns is a challenge because the regulation states that they must be treated as a lead service line until we verify otherwise. This means additional notifications to property owners and creates unwarranted community concerns. So to combat that, potholing is going to be a priority. And when I say potholing, it means that the service line will have to be dug up and exposed so that a visual inspection can take place.
Better use another term for that.
Yeah, it's an industry term, but I hear you. I hear
but
you.
in here, it has a very bad connotation.
Yes,
Would not go to
everywhere,
a
but
city
yeah.
council talking about potholing.
We can work on that and see if we can find, another name for it. But that is industry standard. So.
We hear you.
Yeah.
Oh God, now they're doing our property.
In truth, it's not that invasive. It's just a line on one side of the meter and on the other side. Because the issue is there that our meter boxes, our Ford design meter boxes in other areas of the country, you can pop the lid of the meter box and see what the service line material is on other side. Our Ford meter boxes don't allow us to do that. Also, in northern states, you can just go down to your basement and see what your service line material is. We don't have basements. So before I move on, Blue Conduit is also using predictive modeling, which will help us determine service line material. This is a statistical analysis approach that will show the percent likelihood of lead, but it will not make any changes to material type. So what I mean by that is even if it says that you have 5% likelihood to have lead, your material type will still say unknown. We're not changing it to non-lead.
Well, let me ask a question. When you're, if you actually have lead swabs for testing things at home, is there anything like that for this kind of thing?
No, unfortunately not. And LDH and EPA are very specific about the means and methods you can use to identify the service line, meaning that you either have to do a visual inspection or you have to have historical records.
But if you do a visual inspection and you don't know what it is there's no further step to take?
No, visual would allow you to identify the
Oh, I thought
material.
you said it doesn't always. Okay, all right, thank you. I
Yeah, sure.
misunderstood.
You can do a scratch test on lead is typically what you do. And if you scratch it and it kind of flakes off, that means it's lead.
Okay,
Because lead is very malleable.
all right.
Good thing is the visual inspection, work is state revolving fund reimbursable, which we're about to talk about, state revolving fund. Oh, and then we're on track for our inventory deadline of October 16, 2024. So we've been working towards that and we're gonna meet that deadline. So funding. So the estimated program costs for this program are roughly $1.1 billion. And we're going to talk about how we got to that estimate. And a lot of the reasons for that are the bubbles shown above, historic areas. In a city as old as New Orleans, we have a lot of historical areas. Again, with anything historical having to be restored to its original format, it's going to increase the costs. So our numbers are preliminary, of course, but they're based on our construction costs from 2022 projects, including JRR projects and network engineering projects. We pulled all their costs together. So our cost per lead service line replacement are more than double EPA's cost estimates and higher than those in our neighboring parishes because of the historical restoration, because we have a lot of our lines buried under concrete and so it requires paving. And also because of our meter box design, like we talked about, we have to do those visual inspections. We can't just pop the lid of a meter.
And
So
does the meter box design remain in place after AMI?
it's the same. No, it's been the same. They're not changing the meter
Okay.
box design. Yeah. Unlike newer cities, we know that we're likely to have a large percentage of large service lines and that many locations are going to be historical, like I said, buried under historical streets, which will require extra care and extra time and extra costs. So as we discussed, we will need to perform potholing. We talked about that. So yes, 1.1 billion. But we have potential funding sources. So we've submitted a request to LDH for the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund for $84 million. This funding requires a full lead service line replacement on both the public and the private side. So that means that the end state has to be lead free.
Okay, but given that, the property owner right now is responsible for what's on their side of the meter, right?
By law, yes.
Yeah, so why aren't we charging for that charging the property owner for that replacement in this program?
In order to use this funding, the Drinking Water State Revolving Funding, we have to pay for it. It has to be a full replacement using this funding.
I'm not saying don't do a full replacement. I'm saying charge to replace it because it's just a matter of public health that it needs to be replaced, but charge the property owner. If they don't pay it, lien the property. I mean, I don't understand why we're picking up the bill for that, especially since we don't have $1.1 billion.
Several cities tried all sorts of models, and where you see the trend now is pay for it, get it done, pay for it, get it done. I mean, I've been part of another program where, we subsidized part of the cost. Part of it was on the owners, and it's not an incentive. And that's why the EPA came to the conclusion, we're gonna give you money and we're gonna allow you to use it on private property. And we want you to use it on private property, because unless you fully replace, it's not a success, right?
Where's the federal money?
84 million comes from the federal.
Oh, that's it. Okay, so 84 million, but what is the cost of doing private line replacement compared to 84 million?
I get what you're saying. Yeah, so technically, if you want to look at it this way, it's like half of that would be for the private side, half of that would be for the public
So
side.
that's 500 million.
Mhm.
So why would we give up 500 million for 84 million?
Well, the 84 million is the beginning, hopefully, of a funding mechanism that hopefully the federal government is going to continue with. This is a 5-year program that happened under the IIJA, right, the IIJA money. So the hope is that it's the beginning of
But I mean, do we
many.
really think we're going to get 1.1 billion or $500 million out of the feds?
No,
Okay.
no. Again, there's nothing that precludes us from creating a program that includes or involves people paying for their portion. Then you'll have to start looking at, can you delineate between who needs assistance, who doesn't? It just gets very, very complicated. The approach here is that if the key is to replace the entire line from meter to property, that is the simplest, most efficient way to do it. Otherwise, you're gonna leave a lot of private property lines behind.
Not necessarily. I mean, why would, you could replace them, charge, and, if we don't get paid, we don't get paid, but you lien the property, and eventually it would get paid.
Yeah, I mean, to do work on private property is gonna be challenging enough, even with us providing the funding for it. I can guarantee you there'll be some resistance, and obviously we're gonna lean on everybody we can to break that barrier and be allowed on private property to complete the project. So now add the complication of you shall pay for the work we wanna do on your property. That, it almost like dead on arrival in terms of a proposition. I mean, most cities started with that model. You pay for what you're responsible for, but there was very, very little participation, unfortunately.
But if you have something that requires it, a law that requires replacement, you don't need participation. You're replacing it and you're charging people. I don't, it gets replaced no matter what.
I will say most other utilities in the country are using this
Okay.
method where they use the federal funding, so.
I'm just saying, since we don't have any money, I mean, we've got terrible infrastructure problems, and if there's some way of making people pay what they're supposed to be paying for anyway.
Yeah, I mean, if there's appetite on the city council or the state legislature to make it a requirement, then the property owner can hire their own contractor and get it done within a certain. I haven't sensed that there's any appetite for that, unfortunately.
No, of course not, because they're not responsible for our money, coming up with money.
Yeah.
And
Starting
potentially,
in-
this would be another collection issue.
Yeah, I mean, given where we are, the last thing we want to do is create another contentious situation between us and our customers. And this is not cheap, I mean, this is going to be an expensive item for property owners, and some can afford it and many won't be able to. Then you're creating this, I don't know what the word is here, delineation between they can't afford it and they cannot afford it, in a question of health here and safety. So there's
I'm with you on the health and safety. I'm
Yeah.
just thinking about ways of financing it that don't take money that could be used for other things, to the extent that somebody's really responsible for something anyway.
Yeah.
That's all.
So starting in 2027, per the new regulation, you have to offer to replace the private side. It doesn't say you have to pay for it, but you have to offer to replace the private side. So we would have to use our own crews and our own contracts. They wouldn't have, or if they did hire their own plumber, we would have to offer to do it ourselves. And then, like I said, so the $84 million is what we're getting so far from State Revolving Fund. EPA has also announced that they're going to allocate another $66 million to Louisiana. Now that does get divided among the whole state. But we're looking into all the avenues for funding that we can. And then, as I'm about to talk about, we're also setting up a comprehensive program model that has been endorsed by the EPA. It's called a community-based public-private partnership, or CBP3. So we've researched various program models and eventually landed on this because of its community aspects and also because of its key performance indicators specific to the community and to hold the contractor and firm accountable. So using this model also can attract additional funding opportunities, which is why I wanted to talk about it. So because it's an EPA-endorsed model, we're hoping that it can attract additional funding. Also, using this model can help bring in public and private funding, and they will be able to help us go after additional funding. So in this model, the public entity contracts with a private partner or firm, and then the private partner contracts with large-scale contractors for lead service line replacements, and they also contract with local stakeholders to meet local economic development and community participation goals. Like I said, we have customizable key performance indicators specific for the work type or partner, and these performance indicators will help us hold the partner accountable and stay on schedule.
How is it leveraging the public funding? I'm not understanding it.
Yeah, so essentially it can just attract additional funding opportunities because it's an EPA endorsed model, and they can help us identify additional funding, and they can also go after private funding. So what I've heard from other utilities, because this has been used for stormwater and also for green infrastructure in the past, is that essentially, like, say if Clorox wanted to give us a grant for using their Brita pitchers, they could give us a grant and we could receive that, whereas a public entity, we typically could not. So it kind of just allows us to go after additional sources of money. And because funding is such a huge challenge for us, this is something that we thought was imperative. And also the community involvement, right? Because we're on private property, educating, communicating with the public, being there talking about what we're doing is so important because we do want the public's buy-in. We will have to be on their private property, so it's very important. So we wanted a program that will allow us to do all of those things.
What are they contracting with community stakeholders for?
That's essentially community groups, right? So all the
I know, but what do they have to contract with them for?
essentially so that they can help us with communication to the community and also have buy-in into the program.
Outreach, like I said before,
We're not going to do the outreach, somebody else is going to do the outreach?
that is correct, yes.
And
This
then,
would be like a turnkey where multiple disciplines, multiple needs to deliver a project would be under one tent.
and what is the risk that gets passed through to the private partner? I mean, we're off the hook for what happens?
Because they're contracting with the construction contractors, some of that liability gets transferred to them. And we're working with that with legal about where that liability stands and how that's worked out, but.
You don't want to say that right now.
I will tell you that if the developer, if there's a contract with the construction entity that's going to be replacing it, and the board is not included in that contractual relationship, then the board would not have to worry about the liability if there are any issues or errors in that construction or replacement of that line. Because that's a lot of lines to be replaced.
It's too much to do in-house. I mean, way too much to do in-house. We've talked about the magnitude of this and how quickly it has to go, and we know we have staffing issues with getting staff.
I know it's too much to do in-house, but we usually just, you could get a private developer that you hire who then hires the other people. Couldn't you?
I mean, that's basically the same concept. they will be acting on our behalf with a negotiated price per line, and the risk then is transferred onto that contractor or that partner, and then they're assuming that risk, and they have to deliver each item for that negotiated price. I mean, obviously, we want them to be successful. Otherwise, if they fail, we fail.
Okay, so next we're going to talk about mitigation efforts. So obviously the information that lead pipes exist can cause concern to those who would be impacted. So we have been proactively taking mitigation measures. Communication about mitigation has already begun with proactive steps that customers can take now to protect themselves. We have information on our website, on our consumer confidence report, and our presentations to the community. And upon request, customers are provided with lead test kits. So like I said, we're also in the process of setting up a pilot program for pitcher distribution. So what this looks like right now, and again, this is voluntary before regulation requires it. Pitcher distribution, when there's a disturbance, is not required technically until 2027. But we're doing it now in a small fashion, and we're allowing for customers to be able to request a pitcher if they have a concern. And right now, it's just a pickup mechanism. But we're looking to expanding to being able to do direct ship in the latter part of 2024. So it's essentially that we kind of work out the kinks in that program before we fully open it up. So communication is essential, like we've talked about, communication is not a standalone element, but instead runs throughout everything that we're doing in this program. We want to be a reliable source of information to the community, so we will continue to make factual and helpful information available. Our crews currently provide door hangers to homeowners when a lead service line is found, and I have an example of one of the door hangers here if we want to look at it afterwards. And it notifies the residents of steps that can be taken to mitigate possible lead exposure, and it also tells them where we found the lead service line, if it's on the public side or if it's on the private side. We've also reached out to 6 schools that were identified through smart metering as potentially having a lead service line. Those schools were notified and the replacements were scheduled. We will continue reaching out to the community, including working with community partners to strategically reach those most vulnerable. So some opportunities that we have here is strengthening our partnership with LDH. Obviously, replacing all the lead service lines is our goal, and we're hoping it will increase trust and engagement with the community. But as we've seen, we have a lot of challenges with the historic nature of our city, the cost to implement, and the timeline. Obviously, insufficient funding to support a program of this magnitude, but we're going after everything that we can and trying to set up the program in a way so that funding will be achievable. Like I said, it requires a full replacement for the current funding that we are going after and per LCRI, which is the new regulation. Access to private property is also an issue that we're working through with legal and with the current legislation moving through.
What's the safeguard when work begins on private property to prevent unauthorized personnel?
Sorry, will you repeat the question?
What's the safeguard in place when work begins on private property to address the possibility of unauthorized personnel who might try to get on the property?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's definitely something we will have to, consider when we get farther along. Right now, we're working on just being able to access private property.
We probably mimic something we're doing with the smart meter program, well-identified uniforms, informing the owners in advance that this is what you should expect. Nobody will enter your house, but they'll obviously enter your front yard. They'll have IDs, so, a lot of...
Work well with smart metering.
So far, it's working very well, yes. This is a little bit more involved, so it will require a little bit more education and more identification, but I think it's very, very manageable.
Okay.
We were seeking legislative changes, I thought, to help with the access issue. I mean, is there a building code change requiring the replacement of lead lines so that it becomes a something enforceable? Or?
There's no laws that are anticipated to impose a requirement or forcing the owner to change, but the current bill will allow city or municipalities to create an ordinance to allow us on private property. The other barrier is expending public funds on private property. That still has to be addressed in the Constitution, one way or another. A workaround based on the current funding is that 49% of the money coming to us from the EPA comes in the form of a grant, so it's, forgivable principle. So in this case, because they want us to use it on private property as well as public, we have somewhat of flexibility to do that without many changes in the law.
And that was
We
for
have to
the-
delineate
That's for the inventory though, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
So it
that's,
doesn't go to the actual replacement.
but we have to delineate the expenditures and kind of divvy up the money, and so it's logistically, challenging. But short of having a law that allow us to spend federal dollars, state dollars, and utility dollars, then we'll have to use that method. And to your earlier question, should we fail to get more money beyond the 84? That may change our approach in terms of offering, fully compensated or subsidized replacement of the private portion.
Well, I think we should say that up front if we're going public on this, so that people don't then come back and say, well, you said you'd do this.
Yeah, I mean, now we have the luxury of doing that because the source of the fund is telling us do that.
Right, but I don't think we should be going out to the public saying we're going to be replacing your lines for free if it's contingent on actually receiving money to do it from the feds.
Well, based on what we have now and what we know, the 84 will be earmarked for us for the sole purpose of replacing both private and public portions of the line.
But how much of that has been used for the inventory?
None.
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 Yeah, we haven't received any of the 84, so everything that we spent actually came in the form of a grant
Okay.
for the most part through Blue Conduit. So based on the luxury we're afforded, we're gonna obviously, go about it in one way, but if that money dries up and we don't have any new source of funding, then the equation changes and the approach changes.
I think we need to say that.
Yeah, I mean, we
We're
will.
not- I mean, if this is a presentation that's going anywhere else beyond this committee, I don't think we can go out and say this is what we're doing if it's contingent on funding, without saying it's contingent on funding, because otherwise we've got a 1.1 billion problem.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep, and there's 3 to 4 more years of SRF funding that we know of so far.
What's the total that we think we have?
Right now, we're getting roughly 60 million a year. They delineate it state by
Okay.
state based on need.
But I mean, we the state, or we New Orleans?
The state.
Okay, so what do we know we have?
Right now,
Or
we
can
just know we
reasonably
have the
count on.
84. Yeah.
Huh?
Right now, we just know we have the 84. Yeah.
Yeah, the new tranches for the next 2 years may be more competitive and may go, at least portion of that may go to other municipalities or utilities. Yeah, I mean, we recognize the discrepancy between what we have now, what we need ultimately,
Yeah,
and
but
whether we can afford to subsidize the private portion, but
I mean, I have as a director, I have a problem committing to a $1.1 billion program on the theory that we're going to get money and going out and saying, this is what we're doing, as
Yeah.
opposed to, this is what we're doing. If we get adequate funding, we'll take care of both the public and the private.
yeah.
But if we're not going to get the funding, because, it's a lot of funding to expect.
Absolutely, but what cannot be overlooked is that this is a mandate. Now, it's starting with it being,
Mandate, but not for us to fund it. It's not a mandate for us to
well,
fund
the way it's set up now, it's partially funded mandate, which is fine, unusual, but that is predicated on the current administration's willingness and obviously intent to continue to support this lead-free America, basically. One shift in the administration in November, and who knows what the future looks like. We understand, but the requirement is here, right?
Yes, the requirement is here, but how you go about funding it and whether you charge private property owners for what they're going to have to, what you have to replace for them is not, what I'm understanding, it's not part of the mandate. There's not a prohibition against doing that.
What's part of the mandate is that a line is not considered replaced until both are replaced.
I understand.
Right? And short of a local law obligating the owner to replace theirs, there's really no incentive for them to do it. But we, as the utility, would have failed to comply with the new EPA
Why
rule.
wouldn't we get the local law? Why wouldn't we
I mean,
seek the local law?
we certainly can and we will, but it depends on the conditions and the funding availability. So if the 84 is it, we do have to change the approach for sure
It's
to
gonna be
continue to
difficult.
comply.
It's gonna be difficult to start a program and then end it in a different fashion. So to start it with, okay, we're going to fund both sides. And yes, we can start in certain areas of the city. We can start in disadvantaged areas of the city. But then to end it and say, okay, well, we started in this fashion, replacing both, because we have to with the funding. I understand we don't per the regulation, but we do with the funding. So to start it in that fashion and then end it in a different fashion, it's just not, it might not sit well.
I understand. So are we committing 1.1 billion right now, regardless of whether we get money from the feds or not?
No, it's up for discussion. I mean,
That's what I'm
yeah,
concerned about.
I think we need to be really strategic about it.
Yeah, I mean, other cities have tried different models, changed approaches. I mean, I can tell you Milwaukee was partially subsidized the private portion, and now they went into full subsidy because the participation level was low. It was, the property owner was required to pay $1,700 out of probably $8,000. So it was a good subsidy, and still the participation was low. Denver is paying for everything. I mean, many cities are just absorbing the cost because that seemed to be the only one way to just get this project done.
Get the project done within a very short timeline, unfortunately.
Yes.
My understanding initially it was supposed to be a longer time frame.
Yeah.
But the EPA came out and moved it from maybe 20 or 25 years to now 10 years.
So more to discuss for sure as this
I'm
progresses.
sure this has been addressed. Is there any liability for the utility when lead lines are identified on private property?
Yes, you mean to
Is there any
replacing it?
is there any liability, for example, when an owner discovers that they have lead lines? Is there any liability for the utility because of that?
No, that liability resides with the homeowner.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
However, the problem is that we are under a mandate from EPA to do this in 10 years, to have all lead lines removed within 10 years. That's the EPA, which is the partially funded mandate.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah, sure.
So thank you, Felicia. And now we're going to go on to public comment.
No public comment, Chair.
Okay. And adjournment. Do you want to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
Do I second? Or do we stuck here all day?
I'll second.
We're adjourned.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for the presentations.